The scent of expensive lilies usually signaled a beginning, but for Sophia, it smelled like a funeral. She stood in the bridal suite of the Ritz, the silence so heavy it felt like it was crushing the air from her lungs. On the vanity lay her phone, the screen shattered just like her life. The frozen image of Ryan, her fiancé, laughing at a club in Cabo while she donned a $10,000 gown, felt like a physical blow. Outside the heavy oak doors, the muffled vibrations of 200 restless guests drifted in. It wasn't the sound of celebration. It was the hungry hum of a crowd sensing blood in the water. Aunt Clara's sharp rhythmic knock cut through the gloom. "Sophia, dear," she called out, her voice dripping with more curiosity than concern. "The guests are asking about the open bar. Since there's clearly no groom, we shouldn't let the champagne go to waste, right?" Every word was a needle, stitching the tag of abandoned bride onto Sophia's soul. The heavy oak doors felt like the entrance to a courtroom as Sophia pushed them open. She didn't hide. She couldn't. Every step across the marble foyer was a rhythmic, agonizing click that echoed against the sudden, suffocating silence of the ballroom. 200 pairs of eyes pivoted in unison, not with the warmth of wedding guests, but with the cold, hungry gaze of spectators at a crash site. The whispers began as a low-frequency hum, vibrating against her skin. "Is she actually going through with it?" A voice hissed from the back. Sophia kept her chin level, even as the flashes of smartphones ignited like miniature explosions in her peripheral vision. They weren't capturing a memory, they were documenting a scandal. Then came her father's voice, a booming roar that cut through the music. He wasn't looking at her. He was red-faced, berating the coordinator about the non-refundable catering deposit, his dignity clearly worth more to him than his daughter's shattered heart. She stood isolated, a white-laced ghost in a room full of vultures. The air in the ballroom had grown thin, stagnant with the stench of cheap gossip and fake sympathy. But then the grand double doors didn't just open, they surrendered. Julian Croft moved through the crowd like a predator through tall grass, his presence an effortless vacuum that sucked the oxygen right out of the room. He was a man of steel and glass, New York's most formidable architect, radiating a cold, magnetic authority that made the pity whispers die in people's throats. He didn't stop until he was inches from Sophia, his shadow falling over her like a shield. The smartphones lowered. The vultures retreated. Julian leaned down, the faint scent of cedarwood and power enveloping her. "Look at them, Sophia," he whispered, his voice a low, lethal vibration that only she could feel. "They're waiting for you to break. Don't give them the satisfaction." His eyes, dark and unreadable, locked onto hers with a silent promise. "The first choice was a mistake. Let me be the correction. Stand still, look ahead, and pretend I'm the groom." The ceremony was a blur of ink and adrenaline. As the officiant's voice droned on, Julian produced a leather-bound folder with the calculated precision of a man closing a hostile takeover. These weren't just wedding papers. They were ironclad legal maneuvers, signed and witnessed before the first guest had even arrived at the Ritz. Sophia's hand trembled as she pressed the pen to the paper, the scratch of the nib sounding like a closing trap. When Julian leaned in for the kiss, it wasn't the tentative brush of a stranger. It was a claim, deliberate, protective, and disturbingly electric. The tension in the ballroom shifted from mockery to a stunned, heavy silence. During the reception, Julian moved through the elite crowd like a grandmaster on a chessboard. He fielded the barbed questions from Sophia's family with a lethal, smiling politeness that left them speechless. He didn't treat her like a victim to be pitted. He treated her like the crown jewel of his empire, a silent partnership that felt far more dangerous than any business deal he'd ever brokered. The heavy silence of the bridal suite was broken only by the rhythmic ticking of Sophia's shattered phone. She watched Julian through the vanity mirror as he loosened his silk tie, his movements devoid of the exhaustion one would expect after such a public spectacle. "How did you have the papers, Julian?" she asked, her voice finally finding its edge. "Nobody carries a marriage license to a business associate's wedding." Julian stopped, his gaze meeting hers in the glass. He didn't offer a lie. Instead, he slid a thin, obsidian tablet across the marble countertop. On it were forensic timestamps and geolocation data, proof that Ryan had been seeing a rival firm's heiress for months. "I had a private investigator verify his flight to Cabo 3 days ago," Julian said, his voice a low, clinical vibration. I waited to see if he'd tell you the truth. When he didn't, I prepared a contingency. Sophia realized then that this wasn't a rescue. It was a calculated move. Julian hadn't just saved her from a scandal. He had been waiting in the shadows for years, a silent guardian who knew the truth before she ever did. The suite's balcony door stood open, the New York skyline glittering like a carpet of cold diamonds. When Sophia's phone buzzed with a frantic, stuttering text from Ryan begging for a second chance to save the family merger, she didn't flinch. She simply handed the device to Julian. He didn't even read the full message. With a flick of his thumb, he blocked the number, his expression as unreadable as a granite cliff. "He's a ghost now, Sophia," Julian murmured, his voice dropping into that protective, lethal register. "And I don't believe in hauntings." The power dynamic had shifted irrevocably. Sophia stood tall, the weight of the lace no longer a burden but a suit of armor. She wasn't the jilted girl anymore. She was the partner to the city's most formidable man. As they walked out of the Ritz, ignoring the flashbulbs of the paparazzi, Julian's hand stayed firm on the small of her back. They weren't just escaping a scandal, they were launching a dynasty. The world expected a tragedy, but as the elevator doors hissed shut, Sophia realized they had just witnessed a takeover.